Did you hear about the bank? The bank was robbed. I wonder who robbed it. Welcome back to Lingoni English. My name's Brian, and in this video, we're going to look at the passive voice and how you form it and when you use it. Let's take a look. The passive voice is used to show that an action happened, but it doesn't have to tell you who did it. But why is this useful in English? Well, sometimes you don't know who did an action, or sometimes you don't want to tell who did it. The passive voice is also used for more factual information, and also when the action itself is more important, or the thing that received the action is more important than, say, the person or thing that did it. Let's look at some examples. Imagine that Bonnie robbed a bank. She covered her face, went in, and said, "Give me all your money." She took the money and left. When the police came, they didn't know who robbed the bank, but they still made an announcement saying, "The bank was robbed." Now let's compare these two sentences. Bonnie robbed a bank and the bank was robbed. In Bonnie robbed the bank, there's a subject here, Bonnie, who actively did something. This is an active sentence, or the active voice. In the second sentence, the bank was robbed, the grammatical subject of the sentence is technically the bank. But the bank didn't really do anything. Something happened to the bank. The bank was robbed. This is a passive sentence, or the passive voice. Now, what's the structure of the passive voice? Well, simply you use the verb be, conjugated, and you use the past participle of the verb at hand. For example, the bank was robbed. To see how an active sentence changes to a passive sentence, let's use this same example. The bank in the first sentence is the object, and that will become the subject in our passive sentence. Then you take the verb be and you conjugate it according to the subject. So the bank was robbed. And notice that was takes on the same verb tense as the former verb from the active sentence. So that was Bonnie robbed the bank. Robbed is in the simple past, and was is the simple past. And then we take the verb from the active sentence and change it into the past participle. Here, robbed stays robbed, the bank was robbed, but that's not always the case. Let's look at some more examples to help us learn. Let's look at the example, her friends ate the brownies. In the passive, this would be, the brownies were eaten. And again, you don't even need the subject, her friends, in the second sentence. If you want, you could say, the brownies were eaten by her friends, but that's optional. So in the first sentence, the verb ate is the simple past. And in the second sentence, we use be in the simple past as well. The brownies were eaten. And notice in the passive voice, after the verb be, we use eaten, which is the past participle. So again, the structure is just be plus the past participle of the main verb. Again, the brownies were eaten. Let's look at a few more before we do some practice. And on this next one, pay close attention to the verb tense. Seth will pay the photographer. That's the active voice. In the passive voice, you would say, the photographer will be paid by Seth. What do you notice about the verbs here? Both of them are in the future tense, and they both use the verb will. Again, Seth will pay the photographer, and the photographer will be paid by Seth. Now, we don't always change active sentences into passive ones. There are sentences that normally, when English speakers are talking, they just say as the passive voice first. These next examples might be harder to say in the active voice as opposed to the passive voice. Thanksgiving is celebrated in the US and Canada. The reason why I would use the passive voice here maybe is that I'm talking about Thanksgiving more so than the US and Canada. I'm just giving more detail about the holiday. And you could say maybe that Americans and Canadians celebrate Thanksgiving, but probably not all of them. So I would say that it's more accurate to say that Thanksgiving is celebrated in the US and Canada. All right, let's look at a few more examples. I was injured in an accident. I was injured in an accident. Wine will be poured for the guests. Wine will be poured for the guests. Injera is often eaten in Ethiopia. Injera is often eaten in Ethiopia. The driver was fined for speeding. The driver was fined for speeding. All right, now one way to practice making passive sentences is to change active ones into passive ones. So I'll give you a few sentences and you can think of what they are in the passive voice. If you need to, you can pause the video to have some more time to think. The first one is John vacuumed the living room. The passive is the living room was vacuumed. And if you want, you could say the living room was vacuumed by John. Next we have we will season the vegetables with Creole seasoning. The passive here is the vegetables will be seasoned with Creole seasoning. Next we have the owner painted the store. For the passive, I would say the store was painted, or the store was painted by the owner. Now, there you have it, the passive voice in English. Go ahead and practice by writing a couple sentences in the passive voice in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and check out our other videos for tips on improving your English. See you there. Give me all your money.